Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Monday, November 7 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission. We'll start with the roll call. Mr. Ballard.
Present.
Mr. Shoemaker.
Here.
Mr. Lancaster.
Present.
I'm present. Mr. Hopkins is ill, I understand. We won't talk about why he might be ill. Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Mr. Leclerc.
Present.
And Mr. Song.
Present.
Sean Martin.
Here.
Lisa Token. Mr. Huntley. Ms. Taysom.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Looks like Mr. Price just joined us, so I'm going to promote him to panelist, but he is
Okay.
here.
All right.
Here.
Welcome. Okay, the next item is the adoption of the agenda. Staff have any changes for the agenda? Anyone else? Take a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Mr. Ballard,
Second.
second by Mr. Lewis. All in favor, say aye. Agenda is approved. Next item is the approval of the minutes of October the 3rd. Comments, questions, corrections, or a motion? What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman. On page 3, it says meeting minutes, Transportation Commission, August 1, 2022. And down in the notes, it says approval of August 1, 2022. Did the first one be the minutes from the October 3?
Correct. The other two are correct down in approval of minutes because we did approve two sets of minutes. Good eye. Anything else?
Pick up on that.
Well, I was going to, but you beat me to it.
What was it here? Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
page 5, at the top of the page, the second sentence, I believe that should say respond to regional growth,
Okay,
number 2, and then in number 3, I believe it should say manage I-84/I-184.
okay,
Oh, 184. And then at the bottom of page 5, in the last line, could read Transportation Commission, no, and KNOW. Got it.
anyone else? Anything else? Did they get them all, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, looks good to me, Mr. Chairman.
We would take a motion to approve the minutes with the noted changes.
I'll defer to Mr. Lewis.
So moved.
Mr. Lewis made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lancaster made the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody? No. Minutes are approved as noted. Okay, the next item of business is old business. The Lost Rapids citizen request. Ms. Carson is going to lead us with that one. And this, before we get into it, I'd like to comment that this did start with a citizen's comment to the city or to the mayor about number one, speeding on Lost Rapids and about a crosswalk. I think our discussion today may evolve into even more. So, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was a request, as the chair said, for posting additional speed limit signs and considering a crosswalk. After this group met, there's a summary in the minutes of what was discussed, but it sounds like what came out of that was less of an issue for speed limit signs and crosswalks and maybe more of an issue for additional data so that speed reduction. Sorry, I'm losing my words there. To slow speeds rather with speed bumps or other deterrents something that we can use to slow people rather than just posting more speed limit signs, because it was determined that people driving through there should know the speed limit. The speed limit signs are posted at close interval, and it's the default speed for the city. So nobody can use, I don't know the speed limit as an excuse to get out of a ticket. So we had some additional enforcement out there this month. Corporal Goodspeed is here to speak to that. And then that summary is in your packet as far as the speeds that they collected with their speed trailer. And then ACHD also gave us some of the speeds that they had collected earlier this year that had similar results. So I'm gonna turn it over to Corporal Goodspeed to see if he has anything to add. And then we can discuss what action, if any, the commission wants to take.
Corporal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what to add. We just went out and did some enforcement based on the results of the study that's in the packet. And as an anecdote, I actually was in a pursuit on Lost Rapids after I was, this between the last meeting and this meeting. It turned out to be not a very fast pursuit. The person just decided to not stop, and it was 13. So, yeah, so it was, looking back on it, it was kind of comical because it was a little mini bike, but his intent initially was to get away from police. But other than that, we're just increasing our enforcement or directing our enforcement based on that study to better use our.
But you had an educational opportunity to present to someone.
He was educated, yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions about the speed study?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we were talking beforehand, and I noted on page 9, the speed profile. Was there actually someone who had a maximum speed of 83 to 84 miles an hour? Is that on both closing east and away west? The speed profile.
Commissioner Smith, I can neither confirm nor deny because when I put this trailer out, I've been doing this for years, that we often get an outlier, 1 or 2, but in this case, there was more than 1 or 2. So I can confidently say that there are a number, 1 is too many, but there are a number of speeders going those speeds that's indicated on the chart.
Mr. Ballard?
Does it tell you the time or is it just recording the speed?
No, it tells time.
So the data? He's going 85 miles an hour.
Middle of the day.
Middle of the day? Ouch.
I guess, Mike, if I may, a question on that, because that's the first thing I circled. You're not saying that you believe it's a machine malfunction. You think it could literally be true data,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
okay? And was the readout showing when you were running the trailer?
Yes, it was, sir.
And I think I saw that the maximum speed allowed by the trailer was 120. Was this a case of I can go faster than you can, Fred?
Mr. Chairman, what that's sets up at is it will read speeds up to that. However, it doesn't display speeds over 50 in this particular case. That's the way I've said, because often
Okay,
people use it as a opportunity to see how fast they can go on
Right.
purpose to see if they can get that's the speed display to go higher like in a game. So that's why we don't like to go much higher than 50 anywhere in town. Unless it's warranted, of course.
so they weren't racing the machine, you don't believe? And it's about, according to Global Earth, it's about 700 feet eastbound from there to 10 Mile Road. And according to the internet, source of all information, it takes about 450 feet to stop a car at 80 miles an hour. But I would hate to think I was doing 80 that close to 10 Mile and having to be sure I could get stopped before I got T-boned. Have you any any explanation? None of the rope data showed anything above 39.
I don't, sir. I don't. Every place in town that I put these, every once, in a while- I shouldn't say every place. Often, when I put these, this trailer at a place where there is a long stretch, we get some higher speeds, a handful of them like they do here. The large chart here on page 10 doesn't necessarily say it's approaching or departing, but most of them are departing. Not that it's okay either way. But this, the way it was set was it began to read just past the park is where it's able to pick up a vehicle or stop if it's departing from the trailer until it was obstructed by either the road or trees or whatever. So that distance, it measures if they are coming around that corner, they know 10 miles coming, hopefully that's when they start slowing down.
So it's reading a lot further west than where the trailer was sitting. And therefore they had a lot more time, if they were really doing that, to keep from running out into 10 mile.
Yes, sir.
I just found that fascinating. I mean, I just don't know what to say. Yes, sir.
Show the date. It's the time span, but I see.
October the 11th to October 18th.
Well, yes, but I was just curious if there was some correlation between this car on any particular day, month. I don't see a date attached to that column. I just see a time frame.
Commissioner Ballard, I may be able to pull more accurate if I were to just do a single day. By day by day by day, that would be a large volume of data. But I'm
Just curious if, like, on a middle of the night, somebody decides to go. But I've seen my subdivision where 60 plus on a great stretch, just because they can. Didn't matter what time of day it was. So, just curious.
And I can certainly see if I can obtain that data for the committee.
Okay, if I may, the 85th percentile on the PD trailer was, if I'm reading correctly, 34 miles an hour. And the 85th percentile on the, what I call rope system, Mr. Martin, was 33. So those are in line with each other. Did the 80s not push the PD 85th up higher? Wouldn't it? I don't know how these things work.
Mr. Chairman, that's something that I can't answer. I don't know the inner workings enough to know. Since there was so many vehicles, because you have 61,000 vehicles, and you have a handful of outliers, that probably doesn't affect the overall mean number as to a great effect.
Okay. Anyone else with questions regarding the speed studies, either ACHD or Meridian PD? Okay, Ms. Well, I do have one more. Mr. Martin, could you explain at the bottom of pages 15 and 16, the red and green highlighted data?
Sure. The red and the green is indicating whether it meets our traffic calming policy. So green would mean yes, the red would mean no.
So a yes means what's happening by the data is conforming to what you would like to see.
It's
The
kind
red
of,
means it's outlying data from what you would like to see. Is that one way to put
it
it?
just means we have a policy for traffic calming, whether a street is eligible or not. So we meet it, we compare what's the speeds we're collecting versus the values on our policy manual. So if it's red, it means it does not meet our requirements for traffic calming. If it's green, that means it would then go on to the next step, which is typically some kind of petition process or getting neighborhood buy-in for traffic calming.
So does the data on either one of pages 15, 16 point toward traffic calming or not?
Yes, the data on page 16 at the very bottom where it says you either have to meet speed or volume according to our traffic calming policy. You don't have to meet both. So while it didn't meet the volume criteria, it did meet the speed criteria. So based on this, we would then move forth with some kind of neighborhood buy-in or petition process to see if the neighborhood wanted traffic calming on the street.
And is that going to happen, or does this commission need to make a recommendation or comment or what?
Based on the days of when this data was collected, I'm just looking at it, but since it was collected in February, I'm guessing we've already done that, but I'd have to check with John Watson, who's kind of our residential traffic calming guy at ACHD.
So you'll bring more information back to us regarding that?
I could follow up and let you know if we did in fact reach out to the neighborhood to see if they were interested or not.
He did not mention it a month ago when he was here and we talked about it. He talked in generalities to my memory.
I could follow up with him.
Okay, if you would. Mr. Ballard.
Sean. This speed study comparison. or comparing to other studies, subdivision. You're trying to get a gauge. Does it fall within expected range, or is this something? we use from this particular study? Either one of you, sir.
I would say for keeping in mind this is a collector roadway, it probably is a little higher than what I would typically see.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So I have the unfortunate luxury of living right next to that trailer that was put up there just around the corner.
Tell us
Means-
it wasn't you.
It wasn't me.
Okay.
It was a white Expedition, 2020-ish. Please let me know so I can talk to my 15-year-old. Anyways, so on our Facebook page, Bainbridge Facebook, this is like the #1 topic is this road because people just rip through there. And even just yesterday, there was more stuff and I haven't posted on there. I not interested in getting neighbors to come tell me to put in speed bumps, but that's all they want, speed bumps. And so anyways, I just know that the HOA is very interested in it. And so no one as of within the last couple of days has reached out. I'd be interested to see what happens. But anyway, so the HOA is certainly, from my understanding, very interested in something.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So, Commissioner Ballard, we've heard, we're not sure if, if Mr. Wasson or anyone's reached out to the HOA. I assume, is it fair to say that you haven't, as a resident, heard anything from, about a vote or buy-in? Sure. Okay. In that case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to suggest, a potential action we could take would be to request, instruct, and whatever language is most appropriate, but request that action be taken to see if the HOA would, the members of the community would be in support of putting in some sort of physical traffic calming, be it speed bumps, the speed, the divots, whatever, but a mechanical method of traffic calming.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
can I ask the city council
Miss Murray is out here.
purview to, is it within our purview to reach out, this commission to reach out to the HOA and send them a nudge or a reminder that they may want to chat with either one of these gentlemen, because I know they have calming programs. I've attended a couple, so I'm just asking what's within our authority to make a suggestion to a private group to take advantage of a calming conversation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Miranda, is that something that you would be comfortable doing?
So typically in the past, the way we've handled it is this commission can make a request of ACHD because it's not a request that puts the city in any monetary or fiscal responsibility to make something happen. This commission can make a request directly of ACHD to go speak to the neighbors. That's how we've handled it in the past. Rather, I can't think of a single incident where this commission has reached out via mailers or anything to neighbors. So I think we would have to explore if that's what we wanted to do. We might just have to explore if that's something that would be within our bylaws to do public outreach. I'm not sure if we've done any public outreach before.
Well, do we want to task our fellow member to knock on the door or leave it to another? I'm not trying to put you in a,
Either way, ACHD, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Either way, ACHD is going to have to go through their process. They're rightfully so very strict on their policies. So my understanding from John Wasson is whether we go and hand out mailers or not, if we make the request of ACHD, they've always followed up on that request that we've made. They're going to have to go out and collect and survey the neighbors regardless of whether we send mailers or not. So.
If we ask the neighbors first, get whatever answer and then tell ACHD, they're going to go to the neighbors themselves to see what answer they get. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, likely ACHG is going to go to the neighbors themselves anyways, because I do see some of this data was from September 8th. So it looks like they did some additional speed counts on September 8th. So as Mr. Martin said, if it's already meeting the criteria, they're likely going to do it also. I don't mind exploring reaching out to the neighbors. I just don't have an answer for you right now as to whether that's something we can do.
Mr. Martin, where are we in your mind right now? Or have you seen enough, heard enough to move this forward without us officially doing anything or asking? Or would you rather see us reach out to the neighbors and get in the water first?
Yeah, I don't think you need to have a motion or anything, since this is already on our radar. I'll go back talk with John, find where this is at. I'll report back to Miranda where this is kind of,
Okay,
and then she could relay the information on.
okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So not making any motion then in that case, but I would like to just personally, see if there's any way that we could, increase the urgency of this potentially, because knowing that there are, for example, children who partake in programs in this area, that there are, not not just one, but multiple people throughout the day, varying hours, peak hours, when children might be at that park, going 50, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour.
80 miles an hour is scary.
Yeah, I think it's frankly fortunate that something bad hasn't happened there, given that information. And I would just, I guess, as an individual, ask that might be given some additional weight and urgency.
Mr. Lancaster, you look like you're
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
thinking.
I do have some questions. These may be directed to the officer and to Mr. Martin. So So first off, I notice posted speed limits differ depending on location, it appears. It appears where police set the trailer at Lost Rapids in Calcutta. Posted speed limit is 25. Where ACHD measured at Vincenza Avenue to 10 mile, it appears it's 35 miles per hour. And at Calcutta to Vincenza is 25. Is that right? Is there a speed zone change in there?
I think that might be a typo. I'm not aware of a speed limit change on the road. I think it's just 25 throughout.
Okay, so Mr.
I've driven it. My memory is it's posted 25 at each end.
Perhaps 25. And Mr. Chairman, so that would be the case from one end at what is it, Chinden and Tree Farm? The other end at Lost Rapids and 10 Mile.
Correct.
So I also note, when I look at page 16, and I compare that with page 11. Page 16, it appears this was collected yeah, okay. So these aren't quite lining up for me. Page 16, at the bottom left, it says measured 85th percentile is 37 miles per hour. And on page 11, it says 33 miles per hour.
Wait.
Guess these are collected on different days, right? Page 16 says early February. Page 11 says February 23rd, 2020, 2022. Okay. All right. Guess there's not a question.
Just one point of clarification on that. Not only is it different days, but it's a different method too.
Okay.
The first one you see on page, let's see, was that 11? That would have been a radar. Somebody sitting on there with a radar going at the other one would have been with hoses across the road.
Thanks for that clarification. All right. Mr. Chairman, my next question is, and this is probably directed at the officer, Mr. Martin as well. What's the crash experience on Lost Rapids Drive? Crashes occurring? Are they not occurring? Severity, that sort of.
Commissioner Lancaster, as of now, I don't have, I shouldn't say I don't have, there's no indication that that area has any more crashes than a similar roadway. Most of our crashes are on the intersection roadways, higher speed. Well, actually, any of the intersection roadways in Meridian where most of the crashes occur. Lost Rapids and Tree Farm, we don't have very many, very few.
Mr. Chairman. Just making a note. So I wasn't here last month. I read the meeting notes. So I saw it in the meeting notes and I've heard it today. Are there crossings happening? Are there pedestrian crossings or other non-vehicular crossings happening, into and out of Keith Bird Park? Or they're observed or measured or counted crossings, non-vehicular crossings,
Head crossings.
Miss,
pedestrians, bicycles, scooters, whatever.
Ms. Carson, did you?
so Mr. Chair, I was just gonna give a brief recap of our discussion, like one sentence, and then I'm gonna show a few things on the map here. So can you all see my map on your screen?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So there was reported crossings at the park entrance, Keith Bird. There was recorded illegal parking, people presumably getting out of those illegally parked cars and crossing. Also, people from this neighborhood possibly crossing. It is a gated community, so that's speculation, but there was also discussion that there's an apartment complex here that's on the north side. And areas with more development coming in, areas that are still open to development that will increase the number of crossings we're likely to see at Keith Bird Park, where the number of crossings are estimated to increase as those developments build out and we get more residents using that park.
Olivia is already partially occupied now.
That's my understanding.
Yes, and I'm not sure about the area to the north of the park, if that's.
I believe that's also
status, if that is
partially
occupied.
built out, I believe.
The original, if I may, the original comment question to the city included the request, I think it was a request for a marked crosswalk at the park across Lost Rapids, without any real data about how many people are crossing there, and there should be a marked crosswalk.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's how this all began.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, another question, and Miranda, thanks for having this up. So it appears that on Lost Rapids, east of 10 Mile, that it functions like a residential street with houses fronting Lost Rapids. Whereas between Indian and 10 Mile, it functions like a collector regardless of how it's classified, because it appears that none of the houses front Lost Rapids, right?
No
They're either
driveways.
back up.
There are no driveways.
So no driveways. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I guess where I'm going with this is in listening to the answers to those questions and then looking at the data and understanding what the data says. So, that this looks like, functions like a collector. The speed data would indicate that the speed limit should be 30 or 35 miles per hour, since you only use 5 mile per hour increments, probably 35, since it's 33 miles per hour, not 32. There's no, so the engineering way of setting speed limits is you look at the 85th percentile speed, you adjust that if there's high frequency or high severity of crashes, which doesn't sound like there are, at least nothing notable. So, it almost appears that the speed limit here is too low. So rather than trying to enforce or coerce users to use, road users to use this particular road facility in a way that feels unnatural to the driver, because again, it appears to be and functions as a collector with no driveways, no houses fronting the street, that the speed limit is actually too low in this area. So, so again, rather than enforcing or coercing users to lower their speeds, it seems like the opposite needs to happen and the speed limit needs to be higher. Without, and again, this is why I asked what are the crossings here? Without any quantitative numbers to that, that's not necessarily a reason for adjustment. So there's my questions and comments, Mr. Chairman.
With that being said, and I personally understand where you're coming from. What about the 85 mile an hour vehicles? Over 60, if you want, whatever.
Yeah.
And the park crossing right opposite the park. how does that factor into your somewhat isolated comments regarding speed alone?
Mr. Chairman, so regarding the observed 80 miles per hour, I would throw those out as false data. When I'm looking at page 10, clearly the majority of the vehicles are traveling in 21 to 40 miles per hour. So that's your usable data. All of these that are in red, if I were doing a speed study off of this, I would throw it away as false positive. Same with the 6 to 10 and the 6 to 10s I would also throw away at the far left of the data there. So, you know, machinery gives false numbers.
Okay.
Right. So I'd throw that away. As far as the potential for crossings at the park, well, that's why I asked the question that I asked, right? And that's why I asked about crashes. What are there crashes happening and what kinds of crashes are happening? And right now they're not pedestrian or bicycle or whatever crashes. They're intersection related crashes, which that park isn't. Right. So it would be solving a problem that doesn't exist, right? So that's my response to your query, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Martin. Let's have some fun. From one traffic engineer up here to I am making a wild guess, you could be one down there.
Sometimes.
Well, I don't know what your rank and so forth is, but what's ACHD's comment to those thoughts?
To his thought about increasing the speed limit?
The speed limit and the data and the crossing question.
I don't think I want to comment on the data collection for Meridian Police Department. That's,
Okay.
there are certainly times, depending on where you put hoses and stuff, that you get people turning in and out of driveways, and sometimes you get slower speeds that way recording. Increasing speed limit is always tricky because it's not always an engineering decision. If it was, then, you know, it's easier to follow a set of policies and rules, but that's never one that we just take the engineering into consideration. We have to consider other factors. I would agree that if just looking at the data alone, it probably should be 30 miles an hour, but once again, we don't always just look at numbers, and sometimes you have to consider other factors.
If I may follow up, if it were to be raised to 30, posted as 30, what about the possibility of adding striping and or some type of warning control regarding the park pedestrian question?
I think the question about whether you add a crosswalk or not, I think is independent of whatever the speed limit is. If we have people crossing there, then that's a need. I don't think it really depends on what the speed is. Sometimes the speed determines what kind of crossing you should have, whether it should just be a striped crossing or an enhanced crossing. But that doesn't really change the decision whether you should have one or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leclerc.
Mr. Martin, so is a crosswalk a traffic calming device?
No,
Does it have that effect?
depends on how many pedestrians are crossing. Certainly, if you have a heavy number of pedestrians crossing, people are going to have to slow down. If you only have one pedestrian crossing every hour, you know, what's the odds of you encountering that pedestrian during the hour?
Well, I don't think I would object to having ACHD proceed with their traffic calming process. And so I'd be okay with a motion to that effect. I don't think it hurts much. And it sort of tells them what we think of the, that we've reviewed the speed study and it appears that it would call for a further traffic calming analysis. So that's just a comment and we'll see if a motion gets developed. The thing I haven't heard much about that bugged me from the beginning, and the one day I went over there, it was weekend afternoon, not much was going on, and that parking lot was almost full.
The one at the park.
Yeah. And so we have overflow parking and that's a sight distance problem. And I think maybe we can encourage some enforcement there, but I think I think a possibility for us on this issue is to just maybe a motion to recommend that the Parks and Recreation Department review this location and see if more parking would make sense in lieu of this speed study and the other focus that we've had on this street. So I don't know if that's somewhere we want to go or not, but it's no one else has talked about it. And I think maybe it's something, another item here that we could take action on. So those are just some thoughts and comments. That one question.
Okay, we were headed to the parking as soon as we worked our way through the speeds and the question of the ped crossing. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Martin, you have from our discussion what you need to hear to look further into the neighborhood, their interest, ACHD's interest in traffic calming.
Correct.
Okay. I can't let this go without commenting on a traffic calming device I saw in Edinburgh, Scotland, a couple of months ago. I took pictures of it because I thought, you got to be kidding me. It was a bump out on a 2-lane road with curbs. It took up half of the road. And only one car could go through it at a time. If you were in the left lane, you came upon a bump out. And you had to wait while a car coming toward you went through the opening before you could go through the opening. I just thought it was amazing. I know ACHD wouldn't do it on a bet, but I saw it several places and I can forward you the pictures. It was just interesting. It not only calmed the traffic, it stopped them. Only one at a time could get through the hole. Okay, with that being said, Mr. Hood, would you like to speak to Mr. Leclerc going to the parking question? And then I will also have to comment before you start that people parking on Lost Rapids Drive because of overflow from the parking lot is a traffic calming measure, whether intended or not. Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So I was charged with asking our parks director how programming was going at the park, mainly just to see if it was getting overbooked. I think, just read you a couple of sentences back from him. It says the park is not being overprogrammed. I had Kayla pull reservation reports for Keithburg Park for the past 2 months. There were 0 sports multi-use field reservations in either month. There were only 2 shelter reservations in October and 0 shelter reservations in September. His guess is that the park is receiving quite a bit of first come, first serve use, which we do not monitor or regulate. Now, back into your comment, whether it's scheduled or not, it seems like it's being used well, right? But it's not an issue of too many things that are coordinated through our parks department being reserved and overlapping. So it's just again, first come, first serve issue. We did talk a little bit last month, and again, not that it's the thing, but we do have code requirements for parking. As we discussed, there's not a whole lot of square footage here. So it meets city codes as far as the number of car parks. They're probably technically over parked with how many are there. Doesn't sound like functionally it's enough parking, but there's not a code issue here. So just want to provide that little bit of an update. If you have other questions, I can, but doesn't mean there's not a problem with parking and people parking in a bike lane, at least designed as a bike lane. Again, I don't think it's signed or striped for a bike lane.
Striped, I believe.
It's striped. Okay, so
And signed?
it's both. Okay. So that was some of the other, and again, this is,
It's marked, it's marked no parking.
so this is some of, me staying in my lane a little bit and even the parks director, but if someone's parking illegally in a bike lane, they should be cited for it, right? I mean, that's more of a code enforcement, police enforcement issue. I did, again, ask them to just, again, the question, are you over programming this? Do you need to add more parking? And essentially they said, we don't see a parking problem here. So, in not so many words, that was me paraphrasing. So,
A question. Could or should parks, with the money question not on the table, add parking here if intramural or whatever you want to call it, use is filling that 23 space lot? It's 24, but there's a building sitting in one of them. 23 space lot to the point they're out parking on the street. Would parks step in and enlarge the parking even though it's not through their programs?
so Mr. Chair, members of the commission, you all could certainly ask them to look into that and do that. It's not within your purview to tell parks to put more parking in, but if that was a request for them to look further into this issue, ultimately their funding comes from the city council. So if they say, hey, we got to do a park improvement and add 23 more spots or whatever it is, there is a parks commission as well. So they would vet that through their parks commission and then up to the city council. But again, it's related to the speed, even cut through volume conversation. So again, if that's part of or a separate motion, we can forward that on to the Parks Commission. I can follow up with the director and say, hey, will you look into this? So I can't answer your question directly. Will they do it? They'll probably do some of their own research, but that would be the way to do it.
Could they do it in your experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
Commission members.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Smith.
So given that we know ACHG is going to be proceeding forward, with kind of its processes around community involvement in this discussion, I don't particularly know that there's a need for any motion at the moment or any action. I also don't know that I would support increasing the speed limit given all the additional things that we've discussed about with potential crossings, et cetera, until we had more information or things like that to support asking for that kind of change. So currently, I don't know that there's anything that we need to do. I know Commissioner Leclerc has mentioned having some kind of motion to just be on the record that we're asking ACHG to do so. I think that's fair, but I don't necessarily know that there needs to be anything to happen in my opinion. And I'm obviously free to hear any disagreement, but.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to bring a relevant case up. When we looked at records for a similar park crossing, there was a motion that the TC made to request a crossing review. I don't remember, crossing evaluation, I think is what we called it, a crosswalk evaluation. So we have in the past requested ACHD do a crosswalk evaluation across from a park. Just putting that out as past history of what the Transportation Commission's done.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, with that note from Mrs. Carson. So I go back to the original question, was not the original question to evaluate a crossing here at San Vito. And all of this discussion about speed is on the side. My understanding that that's the question that was asked originally.
My memory is the original question was twofold, speed and the crossing. Ms. Carson, correct? More or
Yes,
less.
it was installing additional speed limit signs and considering a painted crosswalk.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think this commission needs to address both those things. We've learned that if we don't make it specific, then others fill the void.
With that being said, anyone else want to fill the void?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd be happy, I think Mr. Leclerc has something additional to say, but I'd be happy to make a motion after hearing the SSA as well. But I think the things that I would want to see is if we did make a motion was encouraging, reaching out to the community and getting that process rolling with some sense of urgency, specifically regarding painted crosswalks and or mechanical traffic calming, be it speed bumps or some additional implementations to physically slow vehicles. And I'd also, on the speed limit front, I'd recommend not making any changes to the actual speed limit at this moment. Just given the lack of information we have beyond just the pure data about number of crossings and things like that to that nature. So to those two questions, those would be my two suggestions. And it seems like that's kind of in line with what the process already is, and just kind of restating kind of what is explicitly so others don't fill that void. But that kind of, I'm open to other discussion as well.
So that is not a formal motion. That's
Not a formal motion, but just a
Okay.
suggestion of the route we might go down with a formal motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I may
Mr.
ask
Lancaster.
another question. Regarding the second part of what Mrs. Carson said, evaluating a crossing at San Vito, has that specifically been asked or looked at since last month or asked last month?
not to my knowledge. Ms. Carson said not to hers.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I move the commission to request a crossing study of the Ada County Highway District at the intersection of Lost Rapids Drive and San Vito Lane.
We have a motion.
Second.
The motion and a second by Mr. Ballard. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Martin? You're still good on the speed calming / question? And I believe we have just added a second item
Yep, I'm
to
good.
your notes.
Yep,
is that
I'm
good?
keeping
Is that
track
good?
here on my phone.
Okay. Ms. Carson, are we good?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I understand there was not a formal motion to request ACHD follow up with neighbors regarding their desire for mechanical traffic calming, right? Okay.
We accepted Mr. Martin's comments that they would be doing it. But we did act on the motion for a crosswalk study.
The only item pending is the parking then. The only item pending on this would be the parking. The only discussion pending.
Okay, Mr. Leclerc?
Well, Mr. Hood's report is really good, and I think the message has been delivered to the Parks Director that this is a concern of ours. We could follow up at a staff level, but I don't see a big reason to make a formal request of them. They will review this along with the other inputs they've been given during the year to evaluate their maintenance and operations budget and see if they need more parking at this location or that measures up higher or lower than other projects in the city. So I think I'm okay with us with the action that has been taken by staff on this already.
Okay.
I think we've expressed concern about the illegal parking, and I think the police department will look for that, not just the speeding, but if there's complaints to enforce, you know, that bike lane there. So I think I don't know if we have much else to do. I think it was a good motion before, and all I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Lancaster.
if I understand the question correctly, so the first part of it was whether there should be more speed limit signs on Lost Rapids Drive.
Original question.
So I guess I still see that as a loose end, Mr. Chairman. And as a result, I move the Transportation Commission to not recommend additional speed limit signs on Lost Rapid Drive.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Lancaster, a second by Mr. Smith. Discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I did follow up with the resident already that was the discussion that the Transportation Commission had last month with ACHD. So happy to note the motion if it passes, but I wanted to note that as well, that the resident has already been told that the discussion of additional signs is off the table at this point.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lancaster, you had a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if that's the case, and if that part of the question has been answered, then I can vacate my motion.
Withdraw.
Yeah, withdraw. Thank you.
Seconder?
Second.
Agree?
Okay.
Okay. We do not have a motion on the table. Mr. Song?
Is there a difference between a painted crosswalk and legally, is there a difference between a painted crosswalk and just the way it is right now?
Mr. Martin, let me take a crack at that and then you can correct me. No, in Idaho, any intersection is a required stop for cars or motorized vehicles if someone steps off the curb. They have to be showing that they're meaning to cross, but it is illegal not to stop when they do that, painted or not. Can you elaborate or correct me?
You are correct. The one thing that maybe the officer here could even educate myself is of this, best of my understanding, this is a private street on the north, though, if I'm reading that correct. Then the south is a driveway, so it's not a public street intersection. So I don't know if a private street counts as a intersection.
Mr. Chairman, it's
Corporal Goodspeed, educate us.
it's considered a T intersection, so that your example is accurate.
So that is considered an intersection.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Let me clarify.
Yes, sir.
It's an intersection if they're traveling north-south at that curb by the park, would not be across the parking lot access to the park.
Okay. Good, okay. All right. Anything else on this topic? We will move on. Ms. Carson, Transportation Projects Update. There's not a lot of black in your report this month.
Unfortunately, there is not.
Not necessarily unfortunately, but I think that's the least new black we've seen in a while.
I will say most of the updates that y'all get in this transportation projects update is often construction related. I do try to note larger design decisions that the city's asked to weigh in on, especially if we want additional input, need additional input from the TC or council. But right now we have a few projects under design, not as many currently under construction. So that's why you won't see as many as you typically would. So I'm going to start on page 17, just to highlight a few. 10 Mile Road Victory to Overland and the 10 Mile Victory Roundabout has reached substantial completion. This will be the last time you see that item in your packet. On page 18, Locust Grove, Victory to Overland, and the roundabout at Victory is going to begin construction. The notice to proceed is issued for November 2022, November 2022. On page 19, Lake Hazel Road, Eagle to Cloverdale. I did want to draw your attention to this one, especially as community, there's a community feedback survey that's open right now for the design on that project. You may notice if you read this memo each month, you may notice that some of the URLs have changed. ACHD recently updated their platform for posting these projects. So they have them posted now on an engage.achd.org. You can actually go in and search just by the street name to find the project that's any projects that are on that street, and get some really great updates about any projects. So I'd encourage you to go take a look at that while you go in and fill out this community feedback survey for this project as well. Moving on, capital maintenance, there's some progress happening in the FY21 capital maintenance. You'll see one project got moved, one section of the project moved to substantially complete. And then moving down to pathways, that Hollandale Targhee bikeway study was presented to the commission, and now it's for proposed adoption in the winter of 2022. You can go take a look at that pathway. And lastly, on page 22, I wanted to highlight Valley Regional Transit. We talked a lot, or I talked a lot about Route 30, highlighting that starting. And I wanted to also highlight that with that recent service change in October, we now have Route 45 that goes through Meridian. So this is a service that Meridian has not had in the past. It's a new service to our residents. It goes down Fairview and includes stops in Meridian, and it goes from Boise State to CWI down Fairview. So that would be a good route if you need to get cross county from Meridian. And that is all I have, and I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Mrs. Carson regarding the transportation projects update? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, ma'am. Corporal Goodspeed. Away from Lost Rapids Drive. What else do you have for us, sir?
Well, more of the same, I'm afraid. I just was talking to Miranda here. I just got a quick, before I came over here, we have 180 crashes in October that are reportable, which I wish I had more time to validate, well, to show that there's been a huge increase, obviously, over time, and we're still combating that. Most of our time, unfortunately, our traffic team is responding to crashes as opposed to proactive enforcement. Though we do that, and then we get called out to crashes. So I'm just beat that to death. Secondly, you had asked me to share about the incident we had earlier this week, and I can certainly have limited responses for any questions, but I would certainly answer those if they were to come about the best I could.
The question I asked was if anything could be shared with us about the fatality that occurred with a pedestrian at 10 Mile and Pine earlier this week. I have one specific question. And in one of the news reports, it said the pedestrian was going west. But if I understand, he was a Meridian High School student, and it was in the morning, I thought, and I would have thought have been going east. Can you clarify the direction of travel by the parties involved?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the direction of travel is a typo, is incorrect. They were traveling from west to east towards the high school.
Okay, and do y'all know yet for certain if what the situation was regarding traffic signals, walk signals, or any of that? And I understand I'm putting you on the spot. If you can't comment, just say so. That's fine.
Well, at this point, there's no indication that anything was not functioning correctly.
Anyone else? Any questions? For that or anything else with the corporal? Thank you, sir. Okay. Ms. Carson, this has got to be someone's favorite topic that hasn't been on our agenda for a while. City project prioritization primer. Let's have a primer, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So as it says, this is a primer. This is not intended to necessarily open the discussion for these projects. We have not yet received the request. And I back up a little bit because I say that and then I recognize we have some new faces that might not even know what I'm talking about when I say the request. So last year being an exception, every year ACHD sends out a request to partner agencies, the school district, different cities, the county, to request any transportation projects that we have be sent to them in the priority list that we prioritize our requests and send those to ACHD. ACHD then takes those requests, compiles all of the requests, does their magical rankings. And I don't mean that in any like sarcasm towards ACHD. It's a very in-depth process. When I say magical rankings, that's all I mean. They do a very in-depth process for those rankings and determines how they're going to spend their money. So the request process is very important. In past years, the way they've done it is higher prioritized projects get more weight in that ranking than the lower prioritized projects. They have changed their methodology, which we have heard from ACHD. We've also heard from the chair who sits on, I believe you spoke to one of those, to the process methodology.
Prioritization methodology.
Yes. So they've changed their methodology.
Group.
We don't know exactly what that looks like today, but I wanted to go ahead and get the list of projects in front of you that were requested a couple years ago. I wanted to go ahead, if you look at your memo, there's 4 projects there that have been requested to be considered over the course of the last 2 years, from requests to staff as well as requests to the Transportation Commission. I might have a couple more of those to add by our December meeting. So those would be added to the spreadsheet that's included. And this is really just to get the timeline in front of you and make sure that you're aware that the process is coming, and December's meeting will likely be focused almost entirely, if not entirely, on the discussion of this list.
Thank you, ma'am. If I may comment on one item on your 4 that's in your memo that you say have been brought up over the year. I'm looking at the school district representative. Black Cat at Gondola crossing for Pleasant View Elementary.